So if you look at the African continent as a whole, about 60% of the population depends on agriculture. But agriculture only generates about 25% of their income. And that is because very low levels of productivity. So agriculture in Africa and agriculture in Portuguese-speaking parts of Africa, the productivity is very low. In some cases, it is almost 10% or 20% of what other countries are able to achieve. So whether one looks at crops like maize or rice or wheat, or whether one looks at dairy or livestock, in all of these areas, productivity levels are very low. Now, if you look at the future, by 2015, this planet will have about 9 billion people. And we expect the demand for food to grow by about 60%. And so the question is, where is all this food going to come from? And so for me, agriculture and agribusiness presents a tremendous business opportunity, not just for Africa as a whole, but particularly for countries like Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, and other Portuguese-speaking countries which have a comparative advantage in agriculture. This is because the policy environment for agriculture in Africa is not the best. Agriculture is not really treated like a business. Agriculture is treated like a way of life. And so what happens is that people go into agriculture when they cannot find any other job. Typically what happens is people from rural areas, because they don't earn sufficient amounts of money, will migrate into urban areas. The rate of migration in Africa is more than 60%. And then when they don't find jobs in urban areas, they try and migrate to Europe. And we've seen what happens as a result of the refugee crisis and so forth. So the challenge for the policymaker is to make agriculture attractive as a business. And for that, you need to take care of the policy environment. If you take care of the policy environment, and here I'm thinking about land ownership, can people get access to land titles, access to finance, the right fertilizer, the right technology for seeds, banking systems, access to finance. If all of those are made available, just like they're made available to industry, then I think agriculture can become like a business. And then the rates of growth will also rise. It is not true that in every country in Africa, agriculture is not doing well. There are good examples of agriculture doing well in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia. Countries have shown that with the right policies, agriculture can grow faster. So firstly, across Africa, we plan to invest about $24 billion over the next 10 years on agriculture. Now, people tend to talk about Africa as if it is one country. It's not. It's actually 54 countries. Our individual programs in each country are dependent upon the demand coming for that country. So in response to your question, what are we doing in Portuguese-speaking countries? The demands coming from Angola are very different from demands coming from Cape Verde. The demands coming from Mozambique are also similarly very different. But the approach in each of these countries is to analyze what is causing the problem with agriculture. What is the constraint to agriculture? Is it a financing constraint? Is it a technology constraint? So for example, Angola has a comparative advantage in livestock. Right now, Angola imports beef. It imports livestock. Angola should be exporting. But the problem is that Angola does not have the certification needed to make sure that the quality of its meat can be exported into Europe. There's a lot of problem with disease. So what we could do is provide financing to a country like Angola to solve that problem. In other parts of Portuguese-speaking Africa, the yields still remain very low. There are countries that grow maize, for example. In several parts of Africa, the yields on maize are just 1 ton per hectare, right? In other parts of the world, you can do 7, 8 tons per hectare. So we like to go into the country and ask, why is it that your yields are so low? Are you using the wrong type of seeds? Are you not using enough fertilizer? Are your farmers not wanting to invest because they don't own title to the land? So depending upon the nature of the problem, we can provide financing to support the government and the private sector to solve that problem. There is another set of problems also. Africa tends to export raw commodities. So you take a commodity like cocoa, for example. The global market for cocoa is $80 billion. Africa only gets 10 billion. 70 billion goes to the rest of the world. Why? Because Africa exports cocoa in its raw form. It doesn't process it. It doesn't make chocolate. It's only when you go ahead and add value that the price goes up. And therefore people are able to get more money for what they're growing. So what we are planning to do is to help countries start adding value. And so we can provide resources for that. So like I said, about 2 to 2.5 billion US dollars a year across the continent. One is a program called a Program for Agricultural Transformation in Africa. This program essentially provides better access. It's called TAT, T-A-A-T, and essentially this program provides better access to seeds, better access to fertilizer, better access to financing. There's another program that's called Enable Youth. And here the key challenge is, there's a huge unemployment problem in Africa. Africa right now is creating only about 3 million jobs per year. It needs to create 10 to 12 million jobs per year. So the gap between what it can generate in terms of jobs and what it generates is about 7 to 8 million jobs a year. And these are all young people who are looking for jobs. And we think that about 60% of these jobs will come from agriculture. So we've got projects which say, how do we train the young people of Africa so that they become skilled farmers and they start looking at farming as a business opportunity? And then how, once they have the skills, do we give them access to technology through the TAT program, access to financing, so that they're able to become agricultural entrepreneurs or agropreneurs, as we are calling them. This is the program, and essentially what was agreed in Dakar was that all the countries will come to us with their programs and say, what is it that they would like us to finance? So far we've got about 32 countries, I believe. It's somewhere between 30 and 35 countries who've submitted programs to us. The biggest challenge everyone has expressed is the challenge of the youth unemployment, and how do we get the young people interested in agriculture again. Africa has 60% of the world's arable land that is available for cultivation. It has a lot of sunshine, has a lot of water, and yet Africa imports food. Africa should be exporting food. It should be self-sufficient and it should be exporting. So what these 30 countries or 32 countries have said is, we want to become self-sufficient in food, and after about 10 to 15 years, we actually want to be net exporters of food. So what we are trying to do following the Dakar conference is work with these countries to provide them with technology and finance to make that happen. So it's, as I mentioned earlier, when people don't find jobs in rural areas, they migrate to urban areas. And this is creating a tremendous pressure on all the cities in Africa, which are growing very, very rapidly. The rate of urbanization in Africa is among the largest in the world. So the challenge is for us to create the kind of environment where the people want to stay and work in rural areas. And right now that environment is just not there. If we can slow the rate of urbanization, in fact, if agriculture is successful, we should be able to reverse the rate of urbanization, because what is happening is, as I told you, people are going from rural areas to urban areas, and it's not as if they're finding jobs there. And when they don't find jobs in urban areas, they try and take a boat and cross the Mediterranean, and often with very disastrous results. So the key challenge to dealing with urbanization is to get rural development going in a much more sustainable way through programs like I talked about. And we are quite confident other parts of the world have demonstrated that you can get agricultural incomes rising, you can get the yields to go up, and you can generate the jobs for young people, but the policy environment has got to be correct. And that's what we're working on.